I don't think his microphone is working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So I think we can start with the introduction to the organization. What is it that you do? A brief background about it. That would definitely help.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah.
Is it Fizla?
We cannot hear
Oh,
you.
we can't hear you at all.
No, we can't hear you at all.
It
No,
seems like you can hear us.
you need to change the microphone. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. While he do that, so the organization I work with is called SeedChange. It used to be called USC Canada,
Mm.
and we are an international organization working in about 11 different countries globally. Our focus is on food sovereignty, starting with seeds. So we work with farmers globally within Canada and also global on farmers' rights, farmer managed seed systems, and and agroecology. So I know you guys have a series of questions for me. So maybe what I could do is highlight some of that work through some of the questions that you guys had proposed.
Okay. So the first one we want to ask you is can you define food insecurity and explain how it differs from hunger and malnutrition?
Sorry, of course I put myself on mute. I think first is important to understand that when we are talking about malnutrition, we're talking about insufficiency of nutrients, right?
Yeah.
When someone is malnourished, that's essentially what the terminology means. When we talk about hunger, hunger is focused on the actual physical sort of manifestations of the lack of food. So you get hungry when you don't eat food. So when we talk about food insecurity, is actually much more broad in terms of looking at, people's access to adequate food, access to food. So that could be looking at employment, the ability to afford. That could be looking at transportation, the ability to even get to either supermarkets or different places to in order to buy food. When we talk about food insecurity too, it can also look at, how we intersect with issues of housing, and so forth and so forth. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the term food apartheid or maybe food deserts, that really it looks at the fact that where you live as also has an impact in terms of your ability to access good food to eat.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, it helped.
Okay.
It gave us a broader understanding of what
Yeah.
what we're supposed to do. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for the response. And also we want to know what are some of the primary causes of food insecurity, especially in the context of Ottawa and Canada.
Yeah. So in the context, I think I alluded to some of them as well. So what makes people food insecure, I think the first and foremost is affordability, right?
Yeah.
Your ability to afford fresh produce in order to prepare meals for your family is one aspect. Um, I mentioned about housing because they're all very much interconnected. When you look at the fact that in reserves in Canada, especially northern Canada, about 60% of the population live in poverty. And in terms of accessing fresh produce, it's very difficult. And what they actually have to pay for food is quite astronomical. So if you're looking at a loaf of bread up north, can cost you about $20 for a loaf of bread, or getting even watermelon can cost you like $40, right? So
Yeah.
their access to fresh food is a problem, but it's also a problem because of their location that they're at as well. When we look at a community like Jane and Finch in Toronto, most of the people that are living there, the type of jobs that they have access to is temp work, work that is precarious and doesn't offer the same type of security that other permanent, full-time jobs with benefits will provide. So it means that for that community, in terms of being able to access fresh produce to feed their families, it's much harder. So what do you think poor families would do if they can't afford vegetables and fruits and so on and so forth? They will resort to foods that are not necessarily high quality and foods that are not necessarily healthy for their families because it's cheaper to buy, to eat. I think one not very much spoken about, so I talked about housing, I talked about employment. The other piece I must mention is also racism. And you guys must be wondering, how does racism lead to food insecurity? In Canada, the people that are most food insecure, like 1 in 3 Black families, Black and Indigenous families in Canada face food insecurity. And this was a study that was done by Proof with the University of Toronto that found that. And then you ask, well, how is it that Indigenous people, especially First Nations people, the ones whose lands we have the privilege of living on, how could they be food insecure? And it has to go back to colonization and to the fact that they were removed off of their lands, and to the fact that there were the Indian Act and other sort of policies and acts that was implemented in Canada that prevented them from being able to either grow food and sell food to feed their families, or they were pushed into reserves that was not even set up for their families. And also, I'm sure you've heard about the residential school system. During the Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is September 30th, it talks about, the residential school system and the fact that many Indigenous kids were taken from their families, put into these residential schools, and many of them were murdered at the schools and buried at the school graveyard. And thousands of children have been found in some of these old residential school systems across Canada as well, and the ripple effect that it has on the community, and how that then also have an impact in terms of their well-being, their mental health, and also discrimination in order to access jobs to be able to feed their families as well. So that's like a whole other topic, a whole other workshop. So I won't go too much into that.
Yeah. So like, I guess the two answered the three in a way, because the three was like, how does the food insecurity impact individuals and community in both the short term and the long term? So I felt it covered that side as well. So we'll move on to the fourth point, which is who are the most vulnerable groups affected by the food insecurity, and what factors contribute to their vulnerability?
So I just also answered that question with that one, which is Indigenous people, Black people across Canada. And I can send you guys a couple of studies if you would like to cite some of
that would be really helpful.
That lists out the percentages in terms of that. So Indigenous people and Black people make up a large portion, or people of color, right? When you think about immigrant communities, make up a large portion of people that are living in poverty in Canada. And why? Many factors. Some that I listed already, but also racism. I'll give you an example. Someone comes here as a doctor, a physician from their home country. The way the system is set, that Canadian government does not recognize, right, the credentials of that country. So it means that the person coming, even though they've gone to school all their life, will not be able to practice their work. So what do they end up doing? They take on like a taxi job or some other job because they have families they need to feed. Those jobs pay low. So it means that the person is not able to afford good quality food to eat and to feed their families. So that creates food insecurity. And yeah, so I'll leave it at as that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, then what role do the government policies and programs play in addressing the food insecurity? And can you share successful examples from different regions?
Government policies and programs that have been successful.
Yeah.
I wish our government has been successful in solving food insecurity. But okay. So for instance, you heard have you guys heard about the minimum wage?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just increased it this month.
Yes, they just increased it this month. That has a lot to do with people's ability to provide food for themselves. And this is why I say that you cannot solve food with food. Like by giving people food because they're food insecure isn't going to solve the problem. All it's doing is a band-aid solution. I get something to eat today. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be hungry tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
To solve it, you need to look at why can't people get food to eat? So you have to look at those issues. So the minimum wage is crucial. Right now, the cost of living, inflation is quite high. Food prices are crazy. I just went and bought rice for $25.99, right?
Yeah.
A bag of rice that used to be $11.99 at some point, right?
Okay.
So food prices keep increasing, but our wages are not keeping up with it.
Okay.
You know, so think about immigrant families, and I use this example. Think about immigrant families that are coming to the country and, you know, they don't have their credentials, realize it doesn't matter what their education level is, and they're having a hard time getting into the job market. What type of job do they have access to? Jobs that pay minimum wage. Is the minimum wage, if you look at the housing rent, right? In Ontario, in Toronto, don't even talk about Toronto. Ottawa is also getting there in terms of the price.
Getting closer, yeah.
Exactly. So think about the 16, I think it's 1660 that they raise it to or something like that.
1655, I guess, to be precise.
1655, not even 60. I added a few cents. Think about that amount and think about if you are a father with children and you're working full time, let's say 40 hours, that will not be enough to cover your expenses for the month. Right? So that keeps people in poverty. And that keeps people food insecure. So then what it means is that, you know, after we pay our rent, what do? We look at our food budgets and we go, okay, you know, today I really wanted to eat some vegetables and broccoli, but that won't last long and it costs a lot of money. But if I go and buy mac and cheese or some cheap noodles, I can put it in my, you know, my cabinet for a long time and it will go a while. So then they become malnourished because they are not getting sufficient nutrition, or that they, you know, the family goes hungry. And sometimes some parents will even skip meals so that their kids can eat, right? So in terms of government policies, it matters a lot because the cost of living in Canada, I think we should be getting over $20 an hour in order to sort of make ends meet. You know what I mean? So 1655 is never going to be sufficient, right? As a minimum wage to do that. And if you want majority of immigrant families to come up here, how are they ever going to get there when they can't even, every day you're kind of always at the bottom, at the minimum, and you're trying your very best.
They need to fight for their basic needs that they need, right? And then they can't ever grow.
It's like an endless poverty cycle that goes on forever.
Exactly. So it becomes an endless poverty cycle, as you see, that goes on forever. And for the fact that as a country, we don't have a national food policy. We have food safety, right? And we are in the process of trying to develop a national food policy, but we don't have one. You know, the government of Canada is focused on food safety. They're not focused on nutrition, right? People think that sometimes that our laws are focused on nutrition. The government cares if you buy a can of, let's say, canned meat or whatever.
Yeah.
The government is more concerned about, well, the amount of salt they put in there to preserve, you know, is that safe? Or the amount of preservatives and things that's in there, how safe is it?
Yeah.
It's not about, is this food for people to eat? Like, is it actually nutritious? Is it healthy? Right? Like, that's not part of that. And I think that's also the barrier to that.
Can we say it like the food that we get right now, the canned ones, the which are packed foods, they are just filling the hunger right now. They are not solving the health problems. They are causing long-term health effects. They are just right now. Yeah.
Yes. And if you think about it too, it also means that, you know, when we talk about communities having high rates of diabetes, high rates of blood pressure, like all these health inequities that's related to food. So if you're poor and then you don't buy healthy foods because you can afford it, so your focus is on the non-healthy because that will fuel your hunger, but then you end up getting sick, right? In the long term, from eating all that bad food. So it goes on and on and on, and to your piece around the cycle of poverty, right? This is sort of the cycle we talk about. And also the racist practices of our countries sometimes have a role to play. So if you look at the Indian Act, and I do suggest that you guys do some work on this because it's really important to understand why a country like Canada, which is considered a rich country, right? Can have the Indigenous people living here in some communities facing upwards of 60% of poverty rate in a country like Canada, you know? And it goes back to many laws where a lot of Indigenous folks were moved from their lands, right?
Forcefully?
Yeah, they were moved. They were pushed, many murdered, right? There was a lot of massacre and genocide, right? Because to create Canada, as we all know it right now, they needed to get rid of, right, the Indigenous people here so that they can build the new country that we've all come to, you know, where we all live now. And it's had tremendous impact on not just one generations, but generation upon generations of Indigenous Canadians, you know? So I think that's important to also note in terms of who is food insecure in Canada and why they're food insecure. And, you know, the idea that people don't work hard enough, which is not true, because I believe that poor people are the hardest working people in the world. If hard work make us rich, we should all be rich, right? Right? But people have different ways of navigating our system that makes them much more rich than others.
So question 6 has also been answered.
Oh, okay.
So we go to in what ways can non-governmental organizations like your organization and community-based initiatives contribute to alleviating the food insecurity at our local level?
So I think NGOs, right, can do so much, but that work won't go further, won't have more sustainable impact without policy shift and policy changes. I'll give you an example. At SeedChange, the work that we do, we look at the longitude food security of communities and food sovereignty of communities through seeds and farmer-led seed systems. And I'll explain a little bit why, and then to answer the question, Enoch, that you proposed. Seeds. I think sometimes when we talk about food, people forget that you need seeds in order to get food. And our global food system is really controlled by a few large corporations. I think maybe like 5 or 7 globally that controls think about it, our food. And then you have the merger of Bayer and Monsanto. Bayer, the pharmaceutical company, and then Monsanto, the company that's been patenting seeds across. And if you guys are interested in Vandana Shiva's talks and pieces on some of this, you can also look her up. So the problem we have is that these corporations come into a country or region and say, hey, there are so many hungry people, right? The problem that you have, they say, is because the farmers are not able to have a higher yield. We have the solution. We are going to take the seeds that they have, we're going to patent them, right? Make them into hybrid. And we are going to sell that back to them, right? And then we're going to tell them that they also need this specific chemicals that we also sell, the same company, one company.
Yeah.
So you need the seed and you need the chemicals in order to grow food for your community. A lot of farmers, like the global debt for farmers is astronomical. But when you look at, especially North America, US and Canada, I think the studies was focused on 95% of our revenue that's associated with food. So that includes transportation, chemicals, all of it. 95% of that revenue goes to corporations. Only 5% actually goes to farmers and family farmers. That's astronomical. So think about it now. Now the farmer who had the seeds, or the community that had a specific type of seeds that have been passed on from generation to generation, now they're being told that the seeds have been patented. They cannot grow the local indigenous seeds or native seeds in their region anymore. They have to grow this specific one because it has been engineered apparently to get rid of pests, and it's the best, and you will get all these yields, but they have to pay for it. So after you grow it, the next season you have to go back to the company and you have to buy more, and then you got to buy the chemicals that goes with it. And the chemicals also destroy the environment and the ecosystem, and has an impact on climate and the climate crisis that we're having now. So the farmers become indebted to the point that farmers are growing food that they can't even afford to eat themselves. And that's a problem in itself. What we do as an NGO is we work with communities to make sure that their local seeds stay in their hands, and that they have the rights to those seeds as they have always had for generations, to grow that food, but to grow the food in a healthy way, so that we're not just thinking about what we're going to eat today or right now, but we're thinking about what my children, my grandchildren are going to eat for generations to come, because they're growing food in a way that is healthier for the soil, healthier for the environment, and much more nutritious than the patented seeds. And it's also reducing the burden and cost that's on farmers. You know, I don't know if you guys have heard a lot about what happened in India. I think India made a lot of headlines around farmer suicides, farmers
in between,
microcredit, and we're in so much debt. So you kind of get the idea of some of the challenges, not just Indian farmers are facing, but it's a global phenomenon where corporations are coming in and saying, we are here to solve the hunger in your country. And they love third world countries. But really, how they're seeing these worlds is another investment opportunity, right? Another market. I can sell seeds. Mind you, is the seeds they took from the people. So think about taking your seeds and then saying, now it's my intellectual property. And then
you
I
have to
sell
pay
it
for
back.
it. Yeah.
And then I tell you that every time you need to come to me now for the chemicals to grow those seeds, because the seeds can't grow without the chemicals, right? So as an organization, what we do is to help local communities, specifically rural farmers, to breed new varieties of the seeds naturally, in terms of looking at open pollination, and also to grow food in a way that will support the ecosystem that's around them in the long term. We do this work as best as we can. But without policies and without government sort of helping and really making sure that farmer rights are at the forefront, our work will not go far, because a lot of these governments are actually signing on agreements with these large corporations to come in and patent the local seeds, and then bring in these microcredits or bring in all these chemicals that then is eroding the soil and the nutrients in the soil and the environment. Sorry, I know I went really, really far.
No,
But
that was pretty descriptive. It's really helpful.
You're giving us a broader, you're giving us a broader picture of the whole topic. Yeah. So as a group, we came up with some solutions, because from your presentation, I heard we don't solve food insecurity with food. So we came up with some ideas, some solutions to help, mitigate, the level of food insecurity. So we came up with urban agriculture or urban farming, whereby we want to encourage community farming, and also farming at your backyard. And also we came up with the idea of hydroponics. And also we came up with some digital platforms to help with the food insecurity. And so we wanted to know if you can share with us any other innovative policies or solutions.
So can I go back to some of the ideas that you guys have a little bit? And these are some questions. So I also used to manage an urban farm in Toronto. It's about 8 acres of land, the Black Creek Community Farm. And it's situated in the Jane and Finch community. When the farm first started, the idea is that the farm was going to grow food to address food insecurity in the Jane and Finch community. An urban farm is not going to be able to grow enough food to be able to feed people. They're still going to need to go to the grocery store, right? If they're growing food organically very intensively, it means that the food costs can also be expensive. If you look at a lot of farmers markets, right? Sometimes it's the elite, right? It's become like a culture here. They even have evening markets. People go on dates and then they pick up a few things, it's become like very elite, to be able to afford some of the produce at the market. And it's not the fault of the small scale farmers, because I've worked with farmers and I know that growing food is very hard work, and they want to make sure that they can get like premium prices for their food, because they're growing good quality food as well. So the question I have for you guys is, because an urban farm is also looking at, or even growing food in a backyard is the same thing as like solving food insecurity with food, right?
Yeah, in a way.
Is that going to be the question you have to ask yourself? Is, does everyone live? I guess your project is focused in Ottawa, right?
Yeah, it's focused in Ottawa.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Ottawa is very different from Toronto. Ottawa has a lot of land. Like if you see around, Ottawa has so much land. There's so much arable land in Ottawa that is just being watered for grass, which I think is just a waste of water, And if people were allowed to actually grow food on their lawns, I don't know if you know, there's you can't actually grow food. I don't know. Ottawa has some weird laws.
It has laws placed in for that?
Yes, you can't grow food on your lawns. I know there are a group of people that are trying to overturn that law so that people can do that, because it makes no sense to grow grass and just water it and waste so much water. So I think maybe for you guys to think about within your project, how does it really solve food insecurity in the long term, if you're not looking at the bigger systemic issue of income, right? Employment, income, number one, right? If you have money, when you go to the store, the things you pick up are different. You can pick up salmon, you can pick up steak, you can pick up this, right? All these different things. When you don't have money, it's a different shopping experience. You're thinking about, okay, this is all that I have, but I need to eat. So what are some of the things that I need to pick up? So people can grow food The question is, do they have time? Because growing food is intensive. It takes time, right? How many people do you think, even as yourself as students, even if you have the plot of land, do you think you'll be able to like year-round grow your own food and that be sufficient? Right?
No.
You're still going to need to go to the store. Well, unless you learn how to make bread, but you still need to buy the ingredients to make bread, right? And all of those things.
Yeah. So I guess we have limited time now, so I would scale it down to our last question, then we sign up.
Okay.
So we want to know how we aim to align with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the goal number 2, zero hunger. The goal number zero hunger. What role do you see for organizations like SeedChange in advancing these global goals at the local level?
Well, I think the work that we've been doing, so we work with rural women, for instance, in East Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. We work with rural women to improve their livelihoods, to be able to take leadership within their communities, and to be able to grow good food to feed their families as well. So the surplus from some of the food that they grow, they then take it to market, their local market, to be able to sell and to be able to do that. So I think that's one way. The other piece is farmer managed seed system, really making sure that farmers are the holders, right? Farmers are not just buyers of seeds, they're actually producers of seeds. And if seeds can stay in farmers' hands, it means that farmers then don't have to deal with debt, for an instance, and can support their communities by growing a really nice diversity of different produce to help them in terms of their nutrition and also to help around hunger. So that's another way that we try to do that work. And then the other piece is climate adapted seeds. There's a lot of conversations around climate change and the food crisis that we're currently in. And what we do at SeedChange is really looking at working with farmers to make sure that they can have climate adapted seeds. And I'm not talking genetically modified seeds. I'm talking seeds that they've been stewarding on their lands that they know works well in their region, right? In order to be able to provide enough sufficient food for their communities. So we believe that those sort of 3 key pieces supports the zero hunger. Of course, for us, I don't think the focus should be on hunger, but the focus should be on food security to make sure that people are no longer hungry. Because if we're focusing on hunger, then and thinking that giving people food is going to solve the issue, no, they're gonna eat it and come back the next day and say, "Do you have more?" Right? But people want that self-determination to be able to do for themselves and not necessarily get handouts.
Oh, okay.
That's really good. We were going to ask you some closing thoughts, but you just summarized everything so brilliantly. That was really helpful. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you guys have any further questions, please do let me know. I hope I was helpful.
It was really helpful. Yeah, thanks a lot, Amma.
Okay. Thank you so much. Nice meeting you, Adi.
Yeah,
Likewise.
you too.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, you too, guys.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Bye.